Okay, we're going to move to committee of the whole. We have two items in front of us today. The first one is the amendment to the interlocal agreement for jail services. The Whatcom County Sheriff's Office has communicated that the booking restrictions described in option 2 will not be imposed if the City of Bellingham agrees to option 1 in the interlocal agreement for jail services. We have an attachment of the interlocal agreement and the interim process for the change from option 2 to option 1 for the City of Bellingham offenders that has been drafted by the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office. And for a little more detail, I'm going to ask our City Attorney, Peter Raffato.
And I'm going to start briefly. First of all, I want to make it very clear, which I believe the council was very clear, that they were not asking for booking restrictions by picking option 2. We just didn't want to send people to Yakima before they had gone to trial. Secondly, I want to commend our police, our municipal court, and our legal department for all the work they've done in treating this as a very serious issue and taking care of what it is that the city needed for them to do in the face of booking restrictions being applied. So it is my opinion that whether we were under option 1 or option 2, we would be doing the same thing as we're doing now. It makes the sheriff more comfortable to be under option 1. It doesn't seem to me that it makes a difference, and I would tell you if I thought it did. So what that means is the booking restrictions are lifted, and we're able to continue to manage our inmates the same as we would have done under option 2. For me, I mean, I can pick a fight. What did I say Michelle Obama said? When they go low, we go high. Well, I'm going as high as I possibly can go on this one. We have a lot of business to do with the county. If this makes them more comfortable and doesn't change what we're doing, which it doesn't, then I say we have a lot of stuff to discuss on jail and criminal justice, and this is not one that makes any difference. So I am recommending that, well, it doesn't need your approval, but I'm recommending that we do this. And I think that it's, Peter can give more information, but I think it's, any specific questions, ask him or David, but I think that it will work out the same as it would have worked out on the other one.
So Peter Raffato, Legal Department, just to add a little bit, as the mayor indicated, when after booking restrictions were imposed, there was a dialogue between her office and the sheriff's office, as well as at the legal department to jail staff level. And we communicated, I can't remember the exact date, but probably about 2 weeks ago, that we would step up transports. We would increase the number of transports. We said we would transport pretrial inmates, keeping in mind that this is what we committed to do in option 2. Nevertheless, that's the sheriff's office is requesting that that be done under option 1. But the city started initiating these more frequent transports. Actually, it was not this most previous Friday, but the Friday before. And some of those inmates that were transported were pretrial, and that's the same day that the sheriff's office removed the booking restrictions. Staff at the sheriff's office and our lead prosecutor, Ryan Anderson, have been working on some of the details for how that can work. And you see a document in the packet that follows the agreement that outlines some of those specific steps. It does say interim at the top. That was a document drafted by the sheriff's office. I don't know what the meaning of that particular word is, but I just want to make a note of it. And in terms of the numbers, so on that Friday, we transported 6 inmates, and then the following Tuesday. So basically, the way it boils down is we're going to have 2 transports per week on Tuesday and Friday. The main goal that we had to have in place is that we had to be able to have an actual appearance of the inmate in front of a judge before they could be transported. At this time, our in-custody hearings where that face-to-face appearance will occur are on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, which is not unlike what we've had for many years. But anyway, so we transported 6 on Friday. The following Tuesday, we transported 1. And then on this most recent Friday, we transported 5 inmates, with a total of 12 transported to Yakima since we started this stepped-up program. And I guess given everything that's been discussed, we're recommending approval of option 1. And we should ask for council approval because when we presented the interlocal agreement the first time around, we recommended option 2, and that's what council approved, so I would ask for that.
Councilmember Parker.
I'll move that the council accepts option 1.
Second.
Okay. Councilmember Hamel.
I'm just trying to get some clarity around the language in option 1 in the first paragraph in A under option 1. If circumstances require the county to reduce services, such reduction shall be made at the sole discretion of the sheriff in light of his assessment of potential overcrowding, challenges in maintaining critical infrastructure, life safety, security systems, increasing behavioral and security concerns regarding the inmate population, and other factors judged by the sheriff to be relevant. How is that different than booking restrictions?
Yeah, just to be complete on that point, it does say the very first line of option 1, I think, says that services will be provided subject to availability of space within the correctional facility. So I don't know how necessarily to put all that together other than to say that the sheriff has repeatedly said that it's option 2 that specifically led the city into booking restrictions. And taking that at face value and the statements, now I will say that the email that we received is as quoted in the agenda bill, that the booking restrictions referenced in option 2 will not be imposed if we're under option 1. So given all that, my sense is that we will be better off under option 1, assuming we can meet the demands that option 1 presents.
Councilmember Lillquist.
I think I kind of have the same question as Dan. It looks like we're still facing the possibility of restrictions. I have a couple questions. Have the past booking restriction of the last few months affected any other cities in Whatcom County? Were these only to Bellingham? And then related to that, if we adopt option 1, would the city of Bellingham still face a possibility of booking restrictions? And if they were imposed, would they apply equally to all cities and to Whatcom County itself?
The discussion with the sheriff, which I thought he reflected in an email he sent before the final copy of this, was that I said I'm making an assumption that if we're in option 1, we're all treated the same. And he said yes.
Okay, because I mean it's bad enough to face booking restrictions, but it'd be nice if we were at least treated fairly, that the county and the city and everyone was in this together, you know, and if we can be assured of that fair treatment.
Well, that was the premise that the sheriff had all along, and that we were treated differently because we had a different option. And if we have the same option, we're all treated the same. I guess I'll go back to say, our staff is doing an excellent job of working under very difficult circumstances to make sure that we're managing our misdemeanor population to the best of our ability. I do not believe that being under option 1 is going to, or option 2 is really going to make a whole lot of difference. Maybe little legal points perhaps, but the truth is, under option 2, the sheriff had the right to put booking restrictions in, and under option 1, the sheriff has the right to run the jail. So
I just want to be treated, you know, equally.
I
fairly.
believe I would not have agreed to this if I did not believe that that was the case.
Right.
Councilmember Hamel.
Just wanted to get a sense from a police department perspective what the impacts are. There's some pretty stringent time restrictions here under item B under option 1 regarding hearings and reviews within basically 2 days. I just want to inquire about, how does that impact our police?
Well, I'm not certain how that impacts the police department. That's done by the court system. It might have an impact on our warrant officers, but on the patrol officers who are out working the field. And this change really enhances our ability to keep my officers in Bellingham instead of having to transport people down to SCORE and Des Moines. It gives us the opportunity to take our DUI arrests and keep them in a safe place until they can sober up and get released the next day, as opposed to releasing them to somebody else. So there's so many operational benefits to this change. In regards to the hearing times, I'm not quite certain how my folks would play into that.
Okay. I guess I was interested in the driving under the influence, how that would be affected. And how many times have Bellingham police officers transported inmates under the option 2 scenario?
Yeah. While we were on restrictions, we made a total of 2 transports to Des Moines. That's 2 of my officers for about 4 hours of time. Were off the street, and approximately about 20 to 30 warrant PRs or warrants that we just couldn't confirm because of the restrictions. Many DUIs that were released to a sober individual as opposed to booking them into jail until their first appearance.
Councilmember Parker.
I think that's why it's important that we pass this, and we pass this as a team, because it lessens our level of service when we lose officers and we know that we're already down. So I appreciate taking the high road, and I think a wise woman told me to focus on the destination and not the path, and I've been citing that to myself many times this last week. So it's just all of these things where we have to figure out where we're trying to go, and sometimes we have to take a different path. So
the other thing that the sheriff did say in response to Dan's question, when I talked to him on the phone beginning of last week, was that he thought we would be able, and these are his words, that he thought we would be able to work out the transporting, and there would be more flexibility if we were under option 1 than option 2. And I'm taking him at his word.
Any other discussion, Council? We have a motion in front of us to authorize option 1 for jail services. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Our second item today is a continued discussion on the draft 2016 Bellingham Comprehensive Plan. Committee of Whole meeting includes a discussion of the draft introduction of the 2016 Bellingham Comprehensive Plan. The meeting includes a review of staff changes recommended as a result of public comments, as well as additional changes to various chapters per City Council from the August 1st and August 8th work sessions. See COB/comp plan for the draft plan and other information related to the comp plan update. The work session will include a 15-minute public comment period today. And I'm going to turn it over to our director, Rick Sepler, or am I turning it to Lisa?
I'll start. Again, members of the council, good to see you this afternoon. We're coming before you to go over a number of components of the plan as mentioned by Council President. I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, and she'll walk you through the introduction, the proposed changes. Also to note that you have received the complete record of comments to date through the date the packet was mailed. And one of the things you'll see in the future, we're always going to be coming back with more comments every week. So they'll be added to that. We can never have a complete record till your final action. And then we'll say this is all of the comments received to date. Lisa?
Good afternoon. Lisa Poole, Senior Planner with the Planning Department. So we just wanted to start off by going through the introduction of the comp plan. You hadn't had a chance to comment on that yet, so we'll quickly go through some topics on that, and then we'll get into the comment trackers. So since 1980, the guide for Bellingham's growth and development has been the comprehensive plan. It's a broad statement of the community's 20-year vision for the future and includes goals and policies to achieve the vision. So as you know, we made some modifications to each of the chapters, and this includes the introduction. We've removed outdated language. We've revamped the structure of the chapter. We've added photos and graphics, and then our 5 focus areas and legacies and strategic commitments that I'll be getting into in just a moment. So the sections for this chapter have been modified to include a brief history, a snapshot with some data, planning framework, what is a comprehensive plan, the policy foundation, the scope. And just a note on the scope, once again, this is an update, not an overhaul, and it continues the policy foundation generally of the 2006 or the existing plan. We also include the planning process and then the structure of the plan. So this is one of the graphics that is included in the new introduction, and it just generally describes how the process works with the plan development. We have community input, our data, our citywide priorities, our state requirements. That all feeds into our comprehensive plan development. And then our plan implementation includes our regulations, and that includes environmental regulations, city programs, incentives, and our functional plans. The legacies and strategic commitments for the city, as you know, were adopted in 2009. And as the last plan was adopted in 2006, they were not included in the comprehensive plan. So we folded those into the introduction, and we've also made sure that they're reflected in each of the chapters. Just as an example, I'll go through the equity and social justice legacy, how that would work as we folded it into the plan. Each legacy includes a set of strategic commitments. So these are the strategic commitments for equity and social justice. So once we take the strategic commitments and we looked at each chapter and where we could fold those into the goals and policies. So each chapter really reinforces these legacies and strategic commitments. And then the city does have some performance measures that help track these issues. Then in the introduction, we also included a definition of equitable communities, and this was a prior recommendation from council, and this is the definition that we did include. The 5 focus areas. These are focus areas that were identified through the public process last year, and they were also vetted through the public process. They supplement the existing policy foundation and provided guidance for modified goals and policies that reflect changes that have occurred since the adoption of the 2006 plan. Staff reviewed all of the chapters and made sure that gaps were filled and that they were consistent among each other. For example, the urban villages, which is one of our focus areas, the focus on this particular comp plan is really on implementation as opposed to creating new urban village plans. So each chapter really touches on that aspect of urban villages, making sure that we're looking to implement the plans that we do have. So with that, are there any questions or comments related to the introduction before we get into the trackers?
Councilmember Parker.
Oh, I was thankful for the staff. You guys, as I said last time, I think that is a pretty good definition. It's difficult. You look through a lot of equity definitions online, and they kind of always describe equity with equity. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate you taking the time and finding that, and I think it's really important that we really know how we're defining those legacies so we can then develop them appropriately. So great job.
Thanks.
Council members, any additional questions, comments? Okay, go ahead, Lisa.
Okay. We'll move on to the trackers then. There are 2 comment trackers. Both of these are located on the Comp Plan Update website, which is cob.org/compplan. The City Council tracker, it starts with Council's review of the draft plan on June 27th. And then the updated tracker that's in your packet today includes 11 items that are highlighted in green, which indicate new responses per your discussions on August 1st and August 8th. And then we also have a public comment tracker that includes 145 comments from January 8th to August 17th. And then comments that are submitted after August 17th, and there were quite a few, those will be included in the next version of the tracker, and you received all of the comments up to, I believe, last Wednesday at 10 was the deadline in your packet for today, but then any new comments will also be in your next packet. And I did want to note that for the trackers, there are staff responses to each individual comment. Regarding policy H7 and the housing chapter, we'll go through that when we go through the city council tracker. So you did receive quite a few comments related to that after 817. You also received some comments on the Michael Luis report, and our understanding is that he'll be presenting a summary of that report during the public hearing on October 17th, and staff will provide a more detailed response to that.
I just want to say that has not been confirmed yet.
Oh, okay.
We put that out there, but I have not got confirmation yet
Okay.
back from them, just to be sure.
Okay. So regarding the public comment tracker, many of the public comments were folded into staff's recommendations, or they were also folded into Planning Commission and City Council recommendations. So that's why you don't see a lot of highlighted items for where staff's recommending changes based on public comments in the comment tracker. But public comment number 133 is a fairly recent comment. This was from Derek Long of Sustainable Connections, and these are changes that weren't suggested by Planning Commission or City Council, and staff concurs with these and would recommend that these be made. The first one is policy CF 81 in capital facilities, and then the other two are in the housing chapter. So I'd like you to review those, and if you have input on that, we can add them then to the City Council tracker. Yes.
Councilwoman Barker.
Is it staff's recommendation that we go ahead and?
Yes,
Okay.
we do.
I move that we accept the policies CF81, H34, and H38 as they're written.
Second.
Second. Comments, discussion? No? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0 to adopt CF 81, H34, and H38 as amended.
Okay, great. Well, with that, we will move on to the City Council tracker and those 11 changes that I referenced earlier. I will pull these up for the public. Let me see here. Apologies. Okay, here we go. It looks like it's page 28 of the packet for the Committee of the Whole. I don't know what number it is in your packet for the larger, but it's 28 for the Committee of the Whole packet online. And then the first item that we'll discuss is item number 2. And that would be page 30 of the Committee of the Whole packet. Is everybody there?
No, I think page 190, does that seem? 192, okay, right?
Okay, yeah, I knew it was a different number, I don't know.
Yep, that's okay, we'll get there.
Okay.
And Councilmember Barker.
Before we move to item number 2, I see that we made the recommendations, and it looks like they're in there for number 1. One of the recommendations from council was to develop a policy that might allow the director to exercise some freedom instead of sending people to the hearing examiner. Did that get done? Is that later in here, or I don't see it?
That was the new policy.
We felt like that was strong
on item
enough to
number
allow.
1, yes.
Okay.
That was this new policy to develop an administrative process that allows for departures from required infrastructure improvements.
Okay, so that's specific, even though it's not saying hearing examiner, that's what we're getting at there.
Right.
Okay.
That was the new one right there.
It would avoid the need for a variance by providing an alternative process in certain circumstances, and we'll come back before you with the criterions for that as we develop it after the comp plan is adopted.
Okay, so then item number 2, there was a comment from August 1st to go ahead and add a new goal and some policies in the transportation chapter regarding environmental justice. So you will see that new goal and policy are listed right here. Are there any comments on that?
So they're not underlined, but that's all new language?
Yes, apologies, they're not underlined.
Councilmember Parker.
Yeah, this was the request for environmental justice to really be highlighted as a goal. I certainly approve of the language T31 through a balance of prioritization process. Seems to make sense to me. The T32, when we're looking at ethnicity, gender, and then we add income engaged in there, there's just a couple that I think the examples that I had pulled from the federal site, avoiding disproportionately high and adverse impacts. I think we're kind of getting at that by saying we're going to be talking to people and being a little bit more sensitive. There was a specific 1C underneath April Barker there on page 191, which is, so people at home, must be page 30. Oh. And minimize and mitigate unavoidable impacts by identifying concerns early in the planning phase and provide offsetting initiatives and enhancements measurements to benefit affected communities and neighborhoods. And again, this was taken from the Federal Transportation website. And I'm not quite seeing anything that gets at that. Do you feel like that's acknowledged in any other where we early on are saying, you know what, these impacts are going to happen. We have to do this project. But we recognize that, and therefore we're going to seek funding or do things that might mitigate those impacts, whether we're doing health impacts because we're putting a lot more pollution toward a vulnerable area, and maybe we'll be able to improve our parks there, or something that says we will specifically do that if we acknowledge that these impacts have happened or are going to happen.
I would probably defer to Chris Como. Do you know if that is addressed in the chapter? You might want to come up here.
I have to admit I'm at a bit of a loss to really be able to respond, and it's because I'm not completely understanding what is desired. And I think what we've tried to do is show that the city has already taken on a lot of responsibility in this arena. We're already doing an annual report. We're required to do that by the federal government. And we can certainly look at adding some additional language here if council's not satisfied, but I don't know how to answer the question. Again, I'm not completely understanding what it is that you feel is missing.
Do you need me to restate it? Or do you need me to try to explain it differently?
Go ahead and try to restate it.
So some of the concern nationwide is that we have many times not looked at vulnerable populations and how we're impacting them. We are doing, looks like we're acknowledging it in the bike ped plan, we're doing much of that. There are times where there's just no getting around it. We know there's a vulnerable population and we have to do something because we're either required to by state law or something in that. It's going to have an adverse negative effect. Do we have
on
something
on the
population? More pollution, more noise. They're already highly impacted, as we've talked about, through adverse childhood experiences and all those things collectively. Do we have some type of policy that acknowledges early on to say, we acknowledge that, and therefore here's our mitigation to that?
Director Sepler is going to address the SEPA process.
I think that would be a SEPA process. Anything that would have that kind of impact is something we assess as part of our project actions. And we have a strong policy base to look at those kind of impacts and find adequate mitigations if possible. And if we can't find mitigations that are possible, let's say it's an essential public facility, we must do it. We have guidance on how to try to remedy for the community in other areas. So our existing environmental review, which is queued for any significant project, virtually any project.
And transportation is one of 14 items examined through that lens.
Okay.
Yeah, as well as land use, we look at recreation, we look at all the cumulative impacts, and we do that as a matter of requirement of state law.
Okay. Thank you.
Ted Carlson, was there anything that you wanted to add to that? Was there anything you wanted to add to that? I was sure. Are you okay? Or? No, I was thinking SEPA. Okay. Thank you. Lisa?
Any other comments on that one, or
We need to move.
you want to make a motion on that one?
I have one more.
Okay.
One more question, and I'm happy to make the motion. H, address transportation-related pollution and overburden poor environments. So I get that when we do a project, we'll be looking at that, but we might already have areas that we're not doing projects in that before we had these processes, we did that. How do we measure that? How do we know if a population, and I get that once we do a project, we would understand it because we'd be doing a project and the CEPA process would happen, but what about areas that have already been overbuilt, overpolluted, have a lot more noise than they should? How are we measuring that to ensure that we're going back and fixing our past mistakes and we're not just looking further to projects?
I don't think there's a specific policy in the transportation plan on that, but there was a policy that you requested for the environment chapter.
Yeah.
That generally talks
So that's
about
kinda where
environmental
that will wrap
justice
in.
issues.
Okay.
So that's where we've.
Yeah, I'm trying to, because some of these I can see where they kind of point into another
Yep.
chapter or not.
Yep.
So with that, I'll move to accept the language for item 2 on the comment tracker.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0, and that's for item 2.
All right. Item number 3 was the next one on 8.1. There was a request for additional clarification, and after going back and look, we actually feel that that particular issue is resolved through the existing definition of sustainability, and that we don't need a special one.
Councilmember Lillquist?
So I think that we went back and forth on that, whether or not sustainable was to include, in this context, meant environmentally sustainable. We're clarifying that in this chapter and in this context, we really just mean financially sustainable. Is that correct?
Well, in talking to Chris again, you look at the policies under that goal, and they're really getting at the sustainability aspects of alternative transportation modes, bike, ped, transit, et cetera. So we feel like it's economic, environmental, and social. It's actually the broader definition. I mean, the financial issue is wrapped up in the broader definition.
I'm glad that they're all wrapped up. It's just the words that are added say can be maintained as public assets in a financially sustainable manner over time. I'm looking right above that.
Right. We had drafted that, or Chris had drafted that, but then you said to come back with a shorter, more clarified version, and once we talked again, we actually think the best route is just to remove the entire, additional language and just refer to our existing sustainability definition, which is throughout the plan. Item number 4, you can see where we've located that.
Okay, what? I don't remember enough about the original conversation, so I'll just let it go. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. Do we need a motion to accept that, or are we okay?
So, yeah, has council already adopted the underlined language which you
No.
now wish to be stricken?
No, the original request from you was, what does sustainability
Okay.
mean in that particular context?
But no motion needed.
It's really up to you. I think,
I'm fine.
okay. We can just say it's okay and move on? Okay. Thanks. Okay, moving on through the tracker. Item number 11 is the next for discussion.
Page 198, to anybody who's following along in the packet.
And this was on August 1st. Council asked staff to add co-location to CF60 in the capital facilities chapter. So we added that term to the last part of that policy. Right here. Or other type of satellite or co-location facility.
Councilmember Barker.
Yeah, we had a wonderful library board meeting after we discussed this, and I know the mayor had some input of wanting to make sure that we've set ourselves up for success. And quite honestly, Bethany, with the child's the child's portion of the library, she came in with a mass amount of what we're doing in kind of Barclay all the way through Cordata, Meridian. It's just that we haven't really, it's not publicized, it's not super obvious, so when others are advocating for their neighborhood, they're not aware. So I had asked them to maybe figure out a PDF or something quite simple that we would see. They're working in Sterling Meadows, they work in the schools, they're going to some of the retirement communities. I mean, there is a lot, and with that, with the way we've grown there, it's not how we've grown here. You know, there wasn't as much of attention to detail in central community, and so although I think if something could work out with these public-private partnerships at Whatcom Community College or somewhere else, that I want to make sure that language is on point, that if it's more about diversifying our resources and morphing to a population that has different needs, that doesn't necessarily have to be a satellite, but certainly that we're encouraging that. And does that make sense? So would that still be within this language and not pigeonhole us too much? If it was going to be a mobile cart, or we're going to work with some of our subsidized housing, like can we still manage that as we are targeting and we are helping with library services? It's not necessarily a co-location in the meantime while we're waiting for this kind of stuff. Does that make? That was a lot of speaking.
It seems pretty encompassing.
Okay. I don't want this to target us too much toward a location or a satellite when we might be. So I think I finally was understanding what the mayor was saying at the last meeting.
I mean, unless someone else has a different interpretation, but to me, this looks like there's quite a broad amount of flexibility in that.
There is. I mean, it just says consideration of.
Are you
Yeah, it's
comfortable
not
with that?
requiring it.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, and so I'll so move the language on the comment tracker number 11.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor? This is for item number 11. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Item number 11 of the comprehensive plan update.
Okay.
I would like to go backwards.
Councilmember Parker.
So on, which is R196, but it is a really long one. It is number 6. And you can skip to the very end of G on staff response. And at the very end, you know, my concerns were that there's this a little bit of, we haven't really made this connection because it's kind of port and county and city roads as you come down Bennett. So I'm talking about the west end of Bellingham. And that is clearly big enough for trucks. It's super, trucks can come straight down that right from the airport. And as we develop this waterfront plan, I know our current plan is all, because this is, some of this is county, right, is to go Meridian and come down Squalicum. But what's happening is trucks see it as easier, which I don't blame them, to go straight down Bennett and then either connect into Marine Elkridge or go down Seaview. So, which we've even seen the poor people on the edge of Seaview have lost their fence a couple times. So I see that there is no physical connection between, and I just still think we need to be planning, because it's certainly an area I think is a great social justice that probably should be brought into the city at some point, but I'd like to see that we have a plan for how we will be doing that, especially between the airport and the new waterfront and our budding city.
Point of order, I don't have any idea where you're at or what you're talking about right now. Can you explain where you're at?
She signified.
From library.
Yeah,
She said one.
Is this about the library?
She said page 196, point number G, and that might not have been loud enough for everyone to hear.
No,
Okay,
the
so
library did this.
yeah, we're on page 196, and it is item number G, which was item number 6, or question number 6.
Out of the comment tracker.
Yes,
So
and
that's
I
where
defer to Public Works on that particular issue. So.
I just wanted clarification before we move all the way through, since this
Okay.
is our long-term plan.
Chris Como, Public Works. So as I understand it, item G here, there was a question about the concurrency service area map is how this, I responded to this. Is that correct?
Yeah, originally, because I didn't quite understand, that's why we didn't have that in. Now I see the explanation, and I'm still concerned that we haven't quite identified what that connection's going to look like, or that we even need to be having that conversation about that connection.
So what I'm trying to point out here is that, number one, Bennett is in Whatcom County. It's also a designated freight truck route. And the lines in the concurrency service area map, the red lines that were suggested as principal routes, those are not actually principal routes, they're dividing lines. And there's a specific reference to our current tram document. There's also a mention of that. What I thought I heard you say is that you're concerned that there's no direct or physical connection from the waterfront to get people out kind of the northwest part of the city, and that we're simply going to rely on Bennett Drive for trucking. Is that correct?
No, my concern is that we do have a designated route where we're thinking people would come up and then connect into and go to the airport through Bellingham. The reality is when you're coming from the airport, if you're with a load or whatever's being brought in, is that Bennett meets these standards and trucks go down there. And what ends up happening is, and it's perfectly fine and legal for them to then go along the historic kind of Marine Eldridge, but they're then cutting into Seaview, we're getting hits. I just think over time we need to at least acknowledge that we need to understand this connection, and what are we going to do as we grow, especially if we grow that way. Are we looking at solutions to that problem? Because if I were a truck driver, I would totally just come down Bennett and cut in if I could, instead of going all the way down, getting off on Marine, trying to get through all of that intersection and coming down Squalicum Way to get. So I'm just asking that we acknowledge that there's a connection that we need to make at some point. And I know this came up in the comprehensive plan update when Rick, you had just started. We were at the old city hall. That was a comment that I had brought forward. So do you feel like we've acknowledged it and we're prepared for that? Because I know that neighborhood is a little frustrated and feeling like we're not really acknowledging what we're going to do.
I think it's a big challenge to try to find any kind of a new trucking route. Seaview is certainly not set up for something like that. Unfortunately, from a topographic standpoint, there's some real difficulties there in creating a direct connection, and I'm not quite sure what we would do. We can certainly take it up as something to look at, but I don't know what kind of solutions we could offer at this point.
Yeah, that's where some of our policy has been, I think, acknowledging that we have a vacancy or a hole there, and just having a policy understanding that that might be something that we need to be keeping an eye on. So how do you do, I haven't done this before, so I'm asking for a little bit of help. When we've seen that there's some areas that we need to pay attention to, but they're outside of our city, they might eventually come in. They have those connections. We just haven't. We have this waterfront and this airport, and I'm assuming we're going to have a great working waterfront, and there's going to be great connection, I hope. So
is it you're seeking some kind of assurance that, I mean, for instance, if we put some kind of a policy about looking to the future for freight trucking needs, something along those lines? I'm making this up right now.
Well, no, I think that would help. That neighborhood's it's impacted more and more as we do more and more down on the waterfront and people coming off. It's just natural. It's going to happen. And I think that we just need to know that we have an eye on it, and we'll be looking for solutions along that way, because the solutions, as you said, are extremely difficult. I don't see any myself either. But I would hope that our long-term documents say, we see a problem, we don't know the solution to it, but we're going to at least identify that this has been brought up and it's on our radar. If that's not appropriate for the comprehensive plan, then all means we should leave it out, but it's a connection.
Perhaps you might want to consider a policy that would say something like, consider the impact of freight mobility as areas annex and networks become more mature. And we certainly could look at freight mobility as part of our annexation phasing plan.
I will attempt a draft at something and get it.
That would be great.
Councilmember Lilliquist.
Sort of going back on that, I'm looking through the transportation policies, and I didn't see one that, maybe I missed it, specifically addresses our policies on truck routes and cargo transportation. If there is one, I think that'd be the place to add it. If there isn't one, that'd be the thing to do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Everybody good on that one? Yeah. All right. Okay, Lisa?
Okay, let
Where were you
me
headed?
see where we are here.
Tell us the number and I will say the page.
Okay, I believe
Okay?
we're on item number 21.
Item number 21 is on page 200 in the packet.
And this was on August 1st. Staff developed some alternative language to address a comment in the Capital Facilities chapter. So we proposed a new policy stating when possible, energy savings should be directed to increase energy efficiency and support future renewable energy options.
Councilmember Barker.
I'll do a motion to accept 21 language in the comment tracker.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, so we have a motion to, this is accept comments number 21 in the comprehensive plan. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Michael did, yes, sorry. Okay. Go ahead, Lisa.
Moving on.
Yes.
Item number, 25.
Item number 25 is on page 202 in the packet.
So this was relating to adverse childhood experiences, and staff had consolidated the language that April requested to include, but then on August 1st there was a request to go ahead and include all of that language, so that's what you see there.
Councilmember Barker.
Yes, I so move that we accept the language amendments to the comprehensive plan tracker number 25.
Okay, we have a motion in front of us. This is for item number 25. Any discussion? No? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I don't know if everyone had voted on that one. So did everyone vote on that? Okay, so yes. Opposed? No? All right, so motion carries 7-0. That is for item number 25. All right, Lisa.
Item number 30.
Item number 30 is on page 204 of the packet.
So there was a request by April to add some language about making attached ADUs truly auxiliary. So we did that, but then there was some discussion on August 1st about clarifying that intent of that new portion. So as we looked back through the code, they're currently classified as accessory in the land use code, so we don't think that new language is necessary for that particular policy.
Is this related to the language that was forwarded to us from you this morning?
What I forwarded to you in regards to this particular item was this information from the comment tracker, and then I also pulled out a section that talked about looking at impact fee reductions for ADUs.
Oh.
So that was related to this.
Okay.
So I was just showing you that there is some existing language about reducing impact fees for ADUs.
Okay, thank you.
Do we need a motion on that one, Lisa?
If you'd like,
We okay?
it's up to you.
So we never accepted the original language because we
No.
wanted, so we don't
So
necessarily need a motion.
you
at
can
this?
just give
Yeah,
an-
I think we're.
Like it's an okay to move on? Okay. Item number 34 is regarding policy H7. So on August 1st, the bullet point reading requiring owner occupancy in single-family zones was removed with a 4-2 vote, whereas previously the council had voted to accept Planning Commission's language, which was the language above it.
Sorry, number 34.
This is number 34.
Item
Sorry,
number
I
34.
didn't indicate the page number. We are on page 205. And Councilmember Barker and then Borneman.
Yeah, so being a newer council member, I was reminded on what a heated issue this is for people. And I think it was never, I was hoping more people would be able to get back, but it was never my intent that we would remove ever having owner occupancy, but the yarn got spun, and that's the way it's been perceived to the public. And so at this point, there's no reason for us to lose faith and trust in the community. My main concern about this is I watched the Planning Commission meeting, I started doing some of my own research, and I didn't feel like a real breadth of understanding was brought to the Planning Commission on what the impacts of this would be, what the pros and cons are. And I wanted to make sure that we didn't pigeonhole ourselves, because there might be a better solution. Sometimes when you really focus on something, you miss out on the larger solution. So I think if this language, if we revert to the language where it was, I think that might help calm the community, because you know, it's totally fair that we get this process, but the community doesn't necessarily. So when they see something move like this, and unfortunately if they're misinformed, they immediately feel that we've done something unjust or incorrect. So my question is, before I make a motion, if this language reverts back to where it's at, how do I ensure that we will have a full discussion on that? Because there's a lot of concerns. One, we haven't been able to enforce. Two, what do you consider an owner? You know, if a family moves away and it's a daughter or a son, you know, will we be having those to make sure that we have a broad discussion and we come out with the right? So before, I want to make sure that before I make a motion to revert back to the old language.
If you'd like me to respond?
Please.
Clearly, this is setting a policy that allows us to go out and create a draft. That draft would be brought forward for community review in the Planning Commission and discussion. I'm certain virtually every point associated with ADUs will be raised during this process. That draft, after consideration by the Planning Commission, will come forward to this body equally, public comment, equal discussion. So I think it is pretty fair, and you could be assured that all points will be brought up. It's closely watched.
So I, apologize for any misconstrued information that got out there. It certainly is not my intent to cram and jam things down people's throat, but I think in order to move forward and really be respectful of the neighborhood who has stepped up to do a pilot, and it is my sincere apology that this created any stress in anybody's life. It was not meant to do so, but it was spun as such. So therefore, I move that we revert back to the original language. Let's see, it's not the original language. It's the Planning Commission's updated suggestion. Is that clear enough for you?
Yes. Staff had proposed some different language for H7, and what you're seeing there, the underlying language, that's all new per the Planning Commission.
Yeah,
that was not in the 2006 plan.
Yeah, what we've heard clear from community is this will make them feel more comfortable going through the process. And my big thing was, we don't have enough information to pigeonhole ourselves just yet. I want to do good governance and make sure that we are learning from other people's mistakes so we don't create our own. So yeah, I would move that we accept the Planning Commission's modified language on comment tracker 34. So basically reverting back to where we were, because it sounds like we don't need to do anything different in order to still have that discussion. And everybody can go back to, we're all good. Destination, not the path.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Councilmember Borman.
I'm just at a real loss. I submitted for this packet a resolution asking to rescind the council's decision on this. I was told by the president we couldn't put it in because council needed more time to consider this important issue. And now here we are, and I'm definitely going to support this because I don't think the neighborhoods were wrong in their understanding. I think they fully understood the importance of this issue, but I am at a loss that how it's okay now, but when Peter and I submitted this wasn't okay at all because we needed all this additional time for council to consider. So I'm supporting this definitely because I tried to do this because Dan brought this forward to me last week and we were going to do this. And so I'm definitely supporting it. But April, I really don't think that neighborhoods are confused about the importance of this issue because I think they understand it fully because we've been working on these issues for 25 years. So we do fully understand many the significance of the issue around this. And so I definitely support this, but I'm kind of dismayed that how we can do this now, but when I tried to do it, we couldn't. So it's okay.
Okay, and I don't think that April was implying that the public misunderstood. I think
That's what she said. She didn't understand.
Please, point of order, one person talking at a time, thank you. I think that the misinformation was the fact that this is not an ordinance. This was just an opportunity to have a discussion, and that we were going to move forward with complete public participation on an ordinance. And I think that's where the point may have gotten a little misconstrued in regards to what our process was. And that, I believe, is where the miscommunication happened. So I think that I want to make sure I'm not misstating your words here, Councilmember Barker, but I believe what you were saying is that we just want to have opportunity in the future to have a very robust discussion, and that this was misinterpreted, that we were just moving forward on a process without that. And that is not at all what we were trying to imply.
Michael.
Order, was it Michael,
I could hold.
April, and then Councilmember Lillquist, and then
Thank you.
Barker and Borneman.
I appreciate and will support the motion. I think that the owner occupancy requirement is a prudent one. I'm actually in favor of more accessory dwelling units in single-family areas, detached and attached. And the way we get that is we do more or less what's outlined here. We figure out how many there are, limit their impacts where there are too many already. We put certain restrictions in place so that impact still matches the fabric of the neighborhood. So I think that the owner occupancy requirement is an important, an essential component to making ADU succeed. So I will definitely be supporting this.
Councilmember Barker, then Borneman, and then Hamel.
Oh, I just wanted to confirm the earlier part of that was, it was truly a sincere apology. My intention was in no way to say we would never do this or consider it, and I look back at the language, and I felt like we were pretty clear, but I completely understand, having been on the other side of it, that, you know, the constituency isn't dealing with all of these issues all the time and can't read between the lines on that. So I hope that that's very clear. I know a lot of people were almost felt like the city had completely changed things on them, and I think that we have to remember that we're a team, and we're constantly trying to build that community trust. And I made a mistake here, and instead of looking further to really get across what it was that I wanted to come out of it, that I was concerned about some of the exclusionary language, that I wanted to know why we would really have to have it, all of that thing was just that we could have a broader discussion. So a lot of people got upset, and I think it really created possible some lost trust in the council and of this process. And so I just wanted to make that very clear, that that was never my intent. So.
Councilmember Borneman, then Hamel, then Knutson.
Yeah, I'm really in favor of a robust discussion on the ADU issue as we go forward. And I know Mr. Seffler has worked really hard up to this point with the coalitions and others to get to a point where we can have that discussion. What happened with this, by trying to put this language in the comp plan ahead of an ordinance, this would set the base for an ordinance going in that excluded the single-family requirement. That, when it's in the comp plan first, if we pass that and then go to the ordinance, that's where neighbors got really upset and things. By having this, we can still have a robust discussion, but it takes away that fear that this council's trying to get rid of the single family, or the owner occupancy requirement that has been the safeguards and protections that neighborhoods felt. And then I think, but now, and I'm hoping we can get back to a point where neighborhoods will feel confidence in us that we will be open to what they're saying, and we can work together on that. But I really feel if this would have been in the comp plan, that's why the neighborhoods were reacting the way they were. So I'm hoping that we can have a robust discussion, and people are willing to come back to those discussions that you had forwarded previous.
Councilmember Hamel.
I guess along those lines. So we are in a state of housing emergency, what I would regard as housing emergency in Bellingham and other communities up and down the West Coast. Locally, our vacancy rate has plummeted to 0.2%. So put another way, 99.8% of all Bellingham housing is not for sale or rent, and most people can't afford to rent or buy what little there is available. Given this crisis for working class residents, it became apparent to me that the process of considering all types of housing options for workforce, individuals, families, and retirees would come sooner than I thought on my time on City Council. And I want to make it clear, I'm not talking about solving our community's homelessness problem. That's a separate issue. It's related, but it's not the problem I'm trying to address with this activity. It's the dearth of workforce housing. So these are folks that work in retail, food service, light manufacturing, bank tellers, office workers, nonprofit folks, and lack of housing for retirees, or the silver tsunami of baby boomers that are living longer than any previous generation. So if you fit into those workforce categories I just mentioned, and you make only the wages that are provided through that job, and you don't have a substantial nest egg from somewhere else, it's basically impossible to buy a house in Bellingham. And if you make $19 an hour, which is the cutoff point for housing affordability, you might get lucky and find a rental that isn't too small for your family, isn't poorly managed, or isn't in a neighborhood across town from where you work. But remember that 99.8% of all housing is not available. It's a seller's and landlord's market, and working class families and retirees are taking the hit. So it was with this intractable problem in mind that I, along with 3 other council members, cast a preliminary vote to remove as a priority the requirement for owner occupancy for ADUs, accessory dwelling units. My intent was then to help craft policy that would later guide an ADU ordinance that would limit the amount and permissible locations of these types of residences in neighborhoods where it made sense to do so. So things like how far the unit would be set back from the neighbor's fence, or the height or the size would all be a part of that formula as well. Some single-family neighborhood residents saw the worst that could happen as part of this action, that there might be unscrupulous developers or real estate agents that would buy up housing inventory and then convert ADUs on those properties. Given the amount of times and ways that some neighborhoods have been affected by and impacted by absentee landlords and some renters and some perennial issues like parking and partying, it's not difficult to see how the problem stopped being about housing options for working people and retirees and started being about perceived impacts to single-family neighborhoods. But more importantly, what I heard time and time again from people that wrote letters to us on council or testified was that that folks supports owner-occupied ADUs in single-family neighborhoods, and that's what I support. We have an extraordinary amount of work to do as a community when it comes to housing, and we need to start working together now for the greater benefit. Neighborhoods are a part of that, but so is coming up with housing for the next 30,000 people that are born and raised here or people that are moving here. And it is in the spirit that I will do my part in terms of coming up with compromises. I will support this motion that Councilmember Barker just had to include the language for owner occupancy back into the comp plan. So I do ask that we work together, neighborhood representatives, citizens, planning commission, planning department, and council to help craft an ADU ordinance that encourages the appropriate amount and disbursement of owner-occupied ADUs within single-family neighborhoods. We have a long way to go in solving this problem, and this is part of the process.
Councilmember Knudsen.
Being one of the original authors of the language 21 years ago, it wasn't easy putting that language in there. We had a heck of a time. This community went through 23 consecutive Wednesday nights going through the comp plan, and the biggest sticking point was requiring owner occupancy in single-family homes. I'm not surprised how the community reacted. I mean, I'm not going to condone any of the language that was hurled at any of you because I've been on the other end of myself, and it sucks. It really does. It's really unfortunate that an issue can get upset, but I fully understand how the neighbors felt when this language was taken out. Now, nothing's ever a gimme. We're up here, sure, I've been up here 23 years, but some of you might not last that long. And there's going to be other councils, and I'm not going to be here forever either. And decisions will be made contrary to what's in the plan. I fully accept what you've had to say up here. I hope after this motion is over that we can move on and get on with finishing this plan. I don't think anything was done maliciously. It was a decision that was made, and the decision was made. I didn't say much about it because I know it wasn't the final vote. We're going to have another vote on it later, but I have to kind of stick up for the neighbors a little bit because I knew that what the reaction was going to be if that language was stricken. So I'm glad we're heading in this direction, and hopefully we can move on and get back to calmness.
Thank you, Jean. Councilmember Murphy.
My goal is quite simple. I just want a place for people to live. And I want all different kinds of places for people to live. Big, small, mid-sized, everything. And so my big question is always, how do we attract that kind of economic development to our community? And one way I thought that might be more attractive to get it is to get rid of the single occupancy requirement, because we desperately need that variety to meet our growth management objectives. However, I'm willing to bend, I'm willing to amend, because maybe the better way to get that kind of economic development is to allow attached and detached in single-family zoning. And maybe we can get those units in place, and then future councils can wrestle with this decision of whether we could add or delete the owner-occupied requirements. So I'm willing to support this genuinely, but please, community, work with us in understanding we are in this housing crisis, and we are all in this together.
And I just wanted to add a comment myself in regards to my vote is I concur with Dan and Roxanne in regards to trying to just be open. We have a housing crisis. We don't have places for people to live, and we're growing, and it's only going to get worse. And according to the UW's Runstone Center for Real Estate Research, the percent of housing units in the city of Bellingham that are renter-occupied are 54%. So 54% of our populations are renters, and we have to consider that, and consider that we have to provide options, and that's just what we're looking at. We're just looking at the future. We're just trying to find options, and we realize that not everything that worked in the past is going to work in the future, and that we're going to have to be flexible, and we're going to have to work together. No offense was meant to be taken by anyone. We are just looking for options. So I really look forward in all of us working together and solving this together. Alan.
Yeah, Deputy City Attorney Al Mariner, I just want to point out, it sounds like you have a motion to rescind before you, and Councilman Borneman and City Attorney Peter Raffato were working to provide some advance notice. So without the advance notice, a motion to rescind will require the affirmative vote of at least 5 council members. I just want to be clear about that.
I don't believe it was an order to rescind.
I think we were just
I believe that we were revoting on the language that was in there and asking to.
That's what I motioned.
Yeah.
Just like when we voted the first time, and then we learned more and we voted. Now we're just voting to go back.
You're not rescinding the striking of that language?
No.
We are making a new, because that's what my understanding is. These times we'll keep looking at.
Peter come up and talk about that. He's more familiar with the issue.
Yeah, Peter Raffato, City Attorney. Is the result of this motion, if it passes, is it to undo what you did on August 1st?
Yes.
Then it's a motion to rescind, in my opinion.
And it sounds like we have, so what you're trying to tell us is we need at least 5 people. I think I got that, so I think we're good.
Okay. Okay, so just to, and help me out with the wording here, so we have a motion so yes, use the word rescind, okay? We have a motion to rescind the language that was inserted on August 1st, 2016 on the ADU ordinance and the require owner occupied in single-family zones.
So I think we need to rescind the removal, not to rescind the addition of the language.
rescind the removal.
Pinky?
I think you removed the requirement or the priority of requiring owner-occupied. So my understanding is, and maybe you could, I don't have the
There's the
language in
language.
front of me.
Oh, it's
but-
right here.
Okay.
I mean, they just removed the last bullet point that says
Yeah, to
requiring.
rescind the removal of that language,
Okay.
that last bullet point.
All right, so we're rescinding the removal of that language in the last bullet. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Okay, we have more items.
Really? That
This
wasn't
isn't
the
the
only thing in
end.
the
This
entire
isn't the
comprehensive plan?
No, there are more items.
I think so.
Let's see, Economic Development Chapter, item number 36. Oh, sorry.
Before we leave the housing section, I had made a motion prior to the August 1st meeting regarding adding language about definitions of boarding houses and the language about asking for a definition of boarding houses and language regarding them not being allowed, how that works with single family, that we voted on to ask staff to develop a language. I haven't seen that yet.
Item number.
Is there something that's in there?
Do you have an
Item number 33
Terry?
was your request.
What?
Item number
Oh,
33.
okay. I was just asking because I hadn't.
I don't know what page that is in
Yeah,
your.
okay.
It is page 205.
Okay.
Item number 33 was your request to
Okay.
include language on regulating boarding homes in single-family neighborhoods. So we went back and looked at the chapters and this policy.
Okay, that's what I was. I
Okay.
hadn't seen. I couldn't find it. So.
We'll be
Councilmember
coming
Lillquist. Sorry.
forward to council with the town gown, likely in the last quarter of this year. We're coming up to it. As we do, it will have a program to deal with some of the boarding house issues.
Good. Good. I just wanted to make sure it was in there. I'd missed it going through.
Councilmember Lillquist.
With regard to boarding houses, some of you, well, only a few of you were on the council. I pointed out before that we actually have a problem with our boarding house ordinance. We actually do not define them accurately. We do not define them at all. It's a giant loophole, and what we really need is an ordinance fix. And so I've talked to Mr. Sepper about this before. The problem is it's not a big problem, and no one has driven a truck yet through that loophole, but it does exist. I would like to renew once again my request that we consider drafting an ordinance to fix that loophole, and it's pretty easy to do. You just simply define the size of a boarding house, and they're pretty commonly defined in a certain size range. Is the rest of the council interested in closing that loophole and having staff draft that ordinance?
Councilmember Barker.
So I sent you an email earlier. I bumped into a woman that works with our senior population here several times, and she's very interested in finding alternative home types for seniors inside their own neighborhoods. And one of those options that is actually can be funded by Medicaid is to have a boarding style house in single family neighborhoods. So I guess I'm concerned because are we saying boarding houses for students, or are we saying we don't want boarding houses?
The problem is that someone tried to build a 400-unit building and call it a boarding house. I just like ADUs, I really do believe that boarding houses can be compatible in single-family neighborhoods if they're scaled appropriately. And right now we lack that scaling factor, and that's what I would want to include, because otherwise Terry's concern is quite valid. How do these things fit in single-family neighborhoods? Maybe they don't if they're not, covered. That said, I'm not sure where boarding houses are allowed. It may only be in multifamily zones at this point.
If I might, as council will recall, we have a process for the running list. If you, by majority, wish to direct us, we will put that on the running list. We group those together for code amendments to make them more efficient for both SEPA review, and we'll update you on the progress as we come out of the comprehensive plan and move forward on how we'll be implementing it. So it will be an action of council to direct us to put it on the running list.
Did you have your hand up, Terry?
I was just, my hand was up to agree with Michael that we did on the need for defining those things in
Councilmember Barker.
ordinances. All. That was,
So I've kind of learned that as we put more on your plate, sometimes it pushes other things away. Is this in any way going to thwart? I know we really haven't seen the results to the town and gown. I mean, we're going to be seeing that come the new year. It will be very interesting to see how that works Is by putting this on your agenda, maybe going to be pushing something out?
The running list, as you might recall, is to reflect things that we have a sense of importance for, but urgency is a bit reduced. And that way it allows us to consider those sort of text amendments to our code all at the same time. Typically, our practice would be to do that once or twice a year. We've not done it yet this year. We're waiting for this process to toll, and it's likely we'd be able to move it forward early at the end of this year as part of Town Gown, either introduced or at the beginning of next year. There are a couple of items already on the list.
Councilmember Lillquist.
So let me just test the waters. I move that we request staff put the definition of boarding houses onto their running list of tasks to handle in the future.
Second.
Councilmember Barker.
We had a priority on that list, and I know there were some that I was interested in moving up in priority. Will we, as a council, prioritize that for you all, or will you come to us with a priority, or are we needing to send it to you with some type of priority?
Typically, we come before you twice a year. We tell you about the first time our work program, and we get comments and can rearrange things at that time. And the second time we usually come, it's a little late this year because of the comp plan. We'll be coming in September to give you an update on that program, and you'll see what's sort of in the queue, what's emerging, and what we're seeing as something in the future.
I can support that if it seems kosher.
Lisa.
Oh, okay. We're ready to move on?
Oh, do you want to make it? Okay.
We have a second.
Okay. So we have a motion and we have a second, and this is to add the boarding house discussion to the
Definition of
priority
boarding
list.
houses.
Definition of boarding houses to the priority list. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Okay.
You said priority list. I just want to make sure it's the running list. Okay.
Running list. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah. Trying to keep up.
Economic Development Chapter, item number 36. This is just a cleanup. Michael noticed that the map...
One second. I just want to let everybody know we're on page 207.
Great, thank you. Michael had a request to add some information to the legend, to the map on page 10 of the Economic Development Chapter, and I just wanted to note that staff's going to be doing, more of these types of edits, and reading through it again, spelling errors or grammatical issues or notes, and so we'll be doing other cleanups like this as well.
Great.
I don't think you probably need to vote on this one.
Okay.
No. We will probably ask, if I might.
Yes, please.
We will probably ask for the ability to do revisions, provided it doesn't change intent, to fix spelling or clerical errors, grammaticals, things of that nature. We'll probably ask that as we come to the close of our work, and that way you won't see the minor fixes as long as the intent is preserved.
Lisa, a quick question. How many items do we have left to go?
How many are left? 1, 2, 3.
3? Okay.
Can we make it?
Yeah, and then I think we're going to take like a little 5-minute recess before we go into public comment,
Okay.
just because we are now about 35 minutes behind. So I think it'd be great to just take a quick little...
Okay, we're almost there. Let's see. Item number 47.
Item number 47
That's in
is
the-
on page 209.
In the Environment Chapter. And on 8.8, there was a request to modify the language to support broader forms of urban gardening. So this was policy LU 80. We were talking about the Environment Chapter, but this is actually in the Land Use Chapter. So we've modified that policy, and you can see the modification is right there on the next page.
Councilmember Barker.
I so move to accept the amended language on 47 of the comprehensive
Second.
plan tracker.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion
Okay.
carries 7-0.
Item number 57.
Item number 57 is on page 213.
And this was a minor cleanup. We added citywide tree canopy target to make it clear that we were referring to citywide.
Councilmember Lillis.
Move approval to the language changes, item number 57.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of accepting the verbiage for item number 57, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Okay. And the last one would be item number 65.
Item number 65 is on page 214 of our packet.
And this was a request from April regarding camps in critical and riparian areas. And we did propose a policy, a draft policy, on the following page. Protect critical areas and riparian zones by prohibiting camping in these areas.
Councilmember Barker.
Yeah, and for the public that hadn't been watching this discussion, we did have a lot of conversation about what the implications of this would be, but we have had many public comment to say the frustration of the dollars that are being spent towards these riparian areas, and then again the destruction. And we're all trying to be very sensitive to the state of emergency with homelessness. But I do feel strongly that this language will give us some direction on, as we have to start enforcing, where that enforcement will be. And I think at the last time we talked about this, Dan, you had great insight of, as this goes forward, we really need to look at what the fining style will be, or if there will be any fining style, so we're not further impacting somebody who's just trying to find a place, but that we develop kind of a culture around these areas where it's just really known in Bellingham that these areas are not okay. So with that, I move that we accept the language in the comprehensive planning chapter. I can't see it from here. I need new glasses. 65. Thank you.
Second.
Discussion? Okay, we are voting on item number 65 of the comprehensive plan. All those in favor in accepting the language, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
And I did want to just, this last slide here is the upcoming review schedule. So you can see what we've got coming up. We had a tentative meeting scheduled for 9/12 based on how the discussion went today, if we needed to talk about additional changes. On 9/19, we'll be discussing the pro plan. And then on the 26th, you'll be talking about the recommendations you made based on that discussion on the 19th. October 17th is a public hearing, and please note that this is a special meeting date. And then on the 24th and then November 7th, we have some follow-up work sessions, and hopefully we'll adopt this plan.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm just going to ask for a 5-minute break here, and then we'll come back and do the 15-minute public comment period. So we'll be right back.
Yeah. Well, I've got it written down. Oh, yeah, it was
going to reconvene if there's anyone out there that wants to be part of this, like Councilmember Lillquist. Okay, we're going to reconvene, and before we get started, we have a couple comments from planning, from Lisa Poole.
Yes, a few more announcements that I meant to make a little bit earlier. The chapters will be updated with your recommendations, and also the grammatical errors will be corrected and posted at least 2 weeks prior to the October 17th public hearing, and that will be posted on cob.org/comp-plan. Lastly, I did want to note that the Whatcom County Council, I'm not sure if you'd heard, they adopted the county comprehensive plan on August 9th. And by doing this, this includes Bellingham's population and employment forecasts and also our urban growth area boundaries. So those are folded into their comprehensive plan, which was adopted.
Thank you. Michael, do we have anyone on the sign-up sheet over there? No? Okay, so we didn't even need to take a recess? Is that what we're saying? Okay. So no one signed up for public comment? Okay, so just wanted to mention that after our last meeting, we realized that we needed steps to help the public stay within the 3-minute time limit. So we did come up with a couple procedures that hopefully will be helpful. And we're going to give notice when there are 30 seconds remaining. The clerk will say 30 seconds or ring a bell to let the speaker know they are approaching their 3-minute time limit. So, and the city clerk will call time at the end of 3 minutes. So just so you know that we're going to try and make this easier and everyone has adequate time. So please come on down for public comment, and if you could, please state your name.
I'm going to be well within 3 minutes. My name is Jeff Middoff from the South Hill neighborhood. I wanted to thank the council for your vote of confidence for healthy and safe neighborhoods. Neighborhoods are interested in a robust conversation about achieving the goal of a healthy and safe neighborhood. Let's all work to rebuild the trust needed to have that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone here that wishes to speak for our public comment time? Going once, twice, 3 times. Okay, so we will consider the public comment closed. Again, remember that if you are not able to be here in public, if you wish to submit public comments or written comments, please send them to us and they will all be included in our tracker. So we're going to move on to the rest of our committee meeting today. We have 1 set of minutes to approve. These are the special meeting minutes from August 8th.
Move approval.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Are you opposing, Michael, or are you okay?
I voted in affirmative.
Motion carries 7-0.
This sort of looks like 2 sets of minutes.
There are 2 sets of minutes here. There are the evening minutes
Okay, I'm
for
sorry.
August 8th, and there are the special committee
Thank you.
meetings for, I'm not really sure where those went. Okay, so everybody is clear what they voted on? All right, minutes are approved. Let's move into older new business. Councilmember Lillquist.
Yeah, under new business, I'd like to make a request to the council for use of our policy analyst. I had a conversation last week with Mayor Kelly. It has to do with the issue of community broadband. Some communities are using their own, we have a fiber network, but they use their fiber network also as a public infrastructure and amenity. Mount Vernon does this, and for a number of years, Anacortes is looking into it. Some bigger cities, Chattanooga, Huntsville, Santa Cruz, Urbana, Champaign, lots of rural communities do this in particular. The request is to have our policy analysts look into the various models and examples. This is not necessarily moving towards it. I have no idea if it fits Bellingham, if we have the need. This would be some preliminary work to figure out what models and examples are used for community access, There are some organizations like the Coalition for Local Internet Choice. They recommend public-private partnerships. Sometimes it can be all public. It really depends. So that would be my request. It wouldn't be a very large project.
Council? Is everyone okay with that? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Mayor Kelly?
Well, first of all, I appreciate Michael's asking me about this. And as your analyst goes through and looks at different options, our Public Works Department and IT Department do have a lot of information already that I think might be helpful to be shared at the same time.
I think that's great. And thank you for bringing this forward, Michael. I think that more affordable community access for the internet for our population is a great direction for us to go in. Do you have something?
Yeah, just related to that, at our public, at our meeting this morning, a Public Works meeting, we had talked about, it was last year, about Public Works bringing forward a report about the fiber optic systems in the city, what we have, and they're currently working with IT, and we'll be bringing a report about what we have and how what's accessible, what isn't, what's restricted and stuff. And they said they plan on bringing a report forward within a month or so. So that'll be coming.
Councilmember Barker.
So we're still dealing with the food desert over on the north end that impacts, of course, Birchwood and Alderwood outside the city. The good news is a lot of community members have not given up, even though we realize legally there's not much that we can do. And the Racial Justice Coalition, as well as Jobs for Justice, had called me in and wanted to kind of brainstorm on what could we do. And subcommittees were formed, and there's been a lot of work on this to figure out what's a good next step. So the next step is we're going to be meeting a group, including the food bank, a representative from Whatcom Community Foundation. I think we have foundation members from each of the 3 higher institutions. We have somebody coming from the school district, and just a really broad, and people that were ready to step up and say, okay, what could we possibly do either in this space or in another space where we're not subject to the volatility of this grocery market? Whether it be a food hub, a way that we could actually use the Albertsons, maybe even go back to the Albertsons Family Foundation and say, this won't necessarily impact you and maybe it would be really great for you. So I don't know what's going to come out of that, but I'm just really thankful to the community taking time out of their lives and not forgetting about this. And I know some people maybe aren't sure what's going on or think that we have forgotten about it, but we haven't, and we're plugging along, so I'll be happy to bring a report back. And I didn't know if a city member might want to come along.
Mayor Kelly.
And I just want to add that about 2.5 months ago, I got a return call from someone from Albertsons Corporation, and interestingly, I said to this person, I don't think that you're the right person for me to talk to, because it was like an HR person or something. They thought I was going to be talking about the jobs, which of course I'm concerned about too. And I said, well, then I need to talk to, a policy person or somebody that talks about food availability and what's possible to do. And he promised me that he would have someone get back to me, but I haven't heard from them yet. So keep trying.
Councilmember Hamel.
I wanted to thank Chief Newbold and Assistant Fire Chief Rob Kinsel for providing access for me to a training that was conducted about a week and a half ago. It was a violent incident response training. This is a new type of methodology where first medical responders go in basically on the heels of law enforcement officers to try to save lives, basically. And although this was not a real life exercise, it was very realistic, and there's a tremendous amount of stress that those first responders experience in trying to make very important decisions very quickly while there is a gunfire basically going on. So I did want to thank both of them for providing me that opportunity. It was very eye-opening.
Councilmember Murphy.
This evening, I will just be expressing sincere appreciation to the Mount Baker Bicycle Club for hosting the Chuckanut Classic yesterday.
Anyone else? Anything for old or new business? Okay, so we are going to go into executive session. We have 3 items in front of us today. There was a report out in the regular meeting tonight. The first one is litigation, Swatosh versus City of Bellingham. Brady, approximately 10 minutes. Potential property acquisition stamps, approximately 5 minutes. Potential property acquisition stamps, approximately 5 minutes. And I will be back here at 20 after 4 to adjourn or extend. Thank you.